Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, microphone is working. Did you enjoy your lunch?
Yes, very good.
I know somebody's probably already asked you this, but I hope you did. Right. Okay. There's lots of people here that can tell you lots of really scary things about deep technical problems and things they found out and how to break things in a really complex way. This is not that talk. This is something different. Okay, so who am I? I'm James Carter. I work as a cyber risk manager. It's a grand-sounding job title for a large international engineering consultancy. I've been working in tech for 25 plus years. Last 10 of them in security exclusively. And I've done pretty much every job you can do in IT except for web design. I started off writing code for 6809 processors, if anyone is that old in this room. More importantly, who are you? Who here identifies as blue? What I mean by that is, who's a defender? Who works for an IT team? Who tries to keep their organisation safe? Cool. 70-80% of you? Come in, please. Just getting going. Excellent. Right. Okay. This is what your life looks like. You run OpenVMS, Tenable Nessus, Qualys, Outpost 24. Is it all red? Is it always red? Is it always red every month? Does your life feel more like this? Yeah, probably. Why is this? Why are you always basically doing the same thing? Why can't you get any traction on changing that red to orange, to yellow, to green? Is it just organisational inertia? Is it just such a big organisation it can't get change? Is it nobody listens when you tell them about how bad stuff is? You've been to all the technical talks here and you've learned all the technical stuff about really bad vulnerabilities, and you've gone back to your organisation and said, this bad stuff is happening, and they've gone, yeah, right, thanks, and got on with it. They just don't, do they just not understand technology? Come in. Are you basically... This is great. I'm getting a bigger audience for the minute.
The amount of people.
I have. If I keep talking, maybe by the end 20 minutes, you'll be absolutely rammed. Cool. So, are you basically stuck in the InfoSec echo chamber? Are you actually talking the right language? And what by this I mean is, as security professionals, we have a really specific language we use. We talk about 0 days, we talk about vulnerabilities, we talk about malware and all the other things that are incredibly important to how we do our jobs. But that's not the language that our organisations speak. So if we're not talking... Come in.
Just start clapping people.
Yes. Shall I go back to the beginning?
Sorry.
No, please. So, just to recap, are we talking the right language? Are we actually not being understood by our organisations? And if that language is not the right language, what is? What are the languages that our organisations use? And I'll admit, I work for a big private organisation. You don't all do that. You'll work for public companies, you'll work for local authorities, you'll work for NGOs, you'll work for all sorts of different organisations. So forgive me if I use the language of the organisation I work for, and I'll talk about boards and things like that. You'll just have to mentally translate. How does your organisation, whatever size, whatever type it is, make choices and prioritise? What do other teams, other groups within your organisation do to make choices and prioritise? And also, interestingly, what gets the right attention at the right level? If you want to affect a change, if you think there is something particularly bad that needs to be done, who do you need to talk to get that done, and how do you get their attention? You can probably guess from my job title what my answer is going to be. We're going to talk about risk. And we're going to talk about risk, and risk has a technical language of its own. So I'm going to talk to you about the technical language of risk. And we are going to talk about a few of the technical terms, and then we're going to look at the structure of actually how you can use risk to make your job easier and to communicate with your organisation. So, fire. Who's seen this? Fire triangle. To get fire, you need fuel, oxygen, heat. Seen this? Cool. Right. Take one away. You get rid of the fire. Self-evident. It's exactly the same as risk. Here is the risk triangle. Risk is made up of three things: value, vulnerability, and threat. And when I talk about vulnerability here, this is not technical vulnerabilities, although it might be. It's any sort of vulnerability, and we'll come on to what that is. Come in, please, have a seat. Okay, and exactly like fire, you take one of those away, you get rid of or you modify the risk. So far so good? Excellent. I'll take complete silence as an affirmation. Right, so the three parts of it. Value. What has value? Information has value. I'm sad to say, unless you happen to be very lucky and work for a tech company, the thing that your organisation values is information. We mostly work for IT departments. We are so focused on the T because it's cool. It's what we do. It's what we like doing. It's what we love doing, that we often forget about the I. Actually, our organisations really only care about the I. And I'm sorry to say, without the I, the T is just expensive tin and services. And frankly, I suspect our organisations would probably live without it if they could. But they can't, because they need it. So, what makes information valuable? Lots of things. Sorry about the flicking on the slide. I think it's probably my machine, but I'll blame the AV kit. Maybe the information is intellectual property, maybe which is valuable to your organisation. They actually attach £1 value to that information. Maybe that information attracts regulatory or legal reasons. GDPR has a specific value to a piece of information. Maybe it's nothing to do with pounds. Please, come and sit, have a seat. And it's all to do with reputation. Maybe it's a reputation. And many, many other things make information valuable. Okay, the old-fashioned triad of information security, confidentiality, and integrity, availability. Think about these in terms of valuing your information. And don't forget, the information sits on top of a system. That system sits in a building. All those things attract value and have value, but they inherit their value through information. Most of them have no inherent value in their own right. Okay, threat. Too many words, Mr. Carter. You may read the slide. I will not read it to you. But it's easy. Threat. This is the what. This is what is going to happen. Okay? So we've got value. We've got threat. The final piece is vulnerability. Again, this is about weaknesses. Now, this is weaknesses in systems. Obviously, it is technical weaknesses, vulnerabilities, all the ones you found with Tenable Nessus or OpenVMS, all of those. But it could also be a weakness in design. It could be a weakness in process. It can be a weakness in any way related to the system. It could be a weakness in the entry system to the building, that you can basically walk in. You could have the most brilliant cybersecurity, but if somebody can just walk into the building, it's useless. So, vulnerability is the how. So, we've talked about the technical language of risk in terms of value, threat, and vulnerability. We put that together. And interestingly, that gives us a format for describing a risk. What I mean by this, here's a quick example. Our threat is the loss of confidentiality. our item of value is personal data held by HR, something GDPR, something if we're in Europe. And the vulnerability is that we have uncontrolled use of USB media. So therefore, in a very short sentence, we have described a risk. So we've gone from uncontrolled use of USB media, it's really, really bad because bad things will happen, to having a formatted description of the risk. So far, so good. Okay, you've got someone's attention. You've gone to talk to your management team who you want to do something, who you want to persuade to do them, and you've got their attention. You've shown them a risk statement. The first thing they're going to say is, how bad is it? Can you quantify the risk? There are multiple ways of quantifying a risk. The simplest one is like this. It feels quite risky to me. It's okay. It works. It's just not the best. There are many, many good ways of calculating risk. If your organisation already has a way of calculating risk, use it. If you can use it, if you hook into it, use it. Because they accept it already. It's already used to calculate risks, to make decisions. If you've got a team doing health and safety, they almost certainly have a risk calculation methodology. Jump on the back of that. Use it, adapt it, steal it. Remember, information security is just health and safety for data. Nothing more, nothing less. You're going to say, why don't we just use CVSS? And you can. But CVSS is A, technical, and B, has nothing to say about your organisation unless you redo the calculation for who your organisation is. You need, and also, CVSS, again, we're right back into the echo chamber. We're talking our language, not the language of our organisation.
CVSS.
Common Vulnerability Scoring System. You'll find that a vulnerability will have a CVSS score from 0, 0.1 to 10. 10 being, oh my god, the world's going to end, and working its way down. Critical is above 7, for example. Okay, so if we're going to quantify risk, there are many ways of doing it. You can find lots of them. I'm going to show you one, and I'm going to show you a simple one, and it's basically your risk, the value of your risk, is the impact of the risk multiplied by the likelihood of it happening, and I'll show you how that works. So let's talk about impact first. Impact is based on the value of the information plus all the supporting systems. Consider the loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Impacts are not just financial. So what I mean by this is, let's have a look at a simple scale. Now, this one's got 3 grades, low, medium, high. The one I use for the organisation I work for has 5. This one's got 3. So you've got some value. You know, I'm not going to read all of this, but basically a low impact is, not a lot of money, a bit more money, quite a lot of money. Reputation. Reputational impact, especially with larger organisations, publicly traded organisations. Reputation, they care about value a lot, but they care about reputation more. You can always make more money. Okay, you make a mistake, it costs you a bit of money. You're a company, you can make more money. It's hard work, but you can do it. If you lose your reputation, you lose your ability to trade. If you lose your ability to trade, you can never make more money. So reputation is often much more valuable than just value. And you might have a regulatory impact. You might get increased supervision, or you might get fines or criminal proceedings. There are many other types of impact. You need to work out what this is for your organisation. This is specific to your organisation. There is not one size fits all. If there was, it would be easy. Okay, likelihood. What's the probability of the risk occurring? Has it happened before? What have we done about it so far? What's the maturity of our current implementation? Okay, so example of that. Here is a simple 3-point scale of likelihood. From low probability, maybe less than 10%, for example, never happened before, and you've got great controls, through to high. I mean, it's going to happen maybe one out of 2 times it'll happen. It happens frequently, all the time. HR are always losing memory sticks, and you've got no control on your USB media, so you've got to some theoretical high likelihood. Again, this is specific to your organisation. Again, this organisation I work for, this likelihood scale is 5 points. And if you understand ITIL, you can do something interesting, which you can take the ITIL scale of maturity and invert it. Therefore, a high maturity control has a low likelihood of occurring, whereas a very immature control, ad hoc or non-existent control, has a high likelihood of failing. Okay, makes sense so far? Silence, great, excellent, you all agree with me. So, how do we then calculate the risk? So I've said that risk, quantified risk, is impact, which we talked about, multiplied by likelihood, which we've talked about. Again, this risk appetite is unique to your organisation. Nobody else will have one just like yours. And it defines how much risk you can afford to take or want to take. So we use a simple heat map. 3 by 3, 5 by 5, 4 by 4, whatever suits your organisation, whatever works. There's a couple of things you noticed. One is it's asymmetric. In this case, it doesn't have to be. You might have one that's perfectly symmetrical. You might have yellow down here. But this organisation has decided that no matter how unlikely it is occurring, if you have a high risk, we are going to call that red. So I've just used a simple red, amber, green. It looks more yellow than amber. Red, amber, green metric for this. You might give them names. You might give them numbers. You might have 5, 7, 20 grades. It's up to you. One that works. Simpler is better. And like I say, if your organisation's already got one, use it. This one, my example, we have action. So anything that's red, fix it now. Anything that's amber, yellow, fix it soon. Anything that's green, accept it. And that's new, because if we come from the IT break-fix world, we're used to the idea that we have to fix everything all the time. There's no, because if you don't fix it, you don't get to close the service test ticket. If you don't close the service test ticket, you fail your SLA. Exactly. So, but you don't have to fix it. You can treat the risk. This is what we're used to doing, treating. We can take some action to mitigate the risk. We can change something. We can tolerate it. We can accept the risk. We can live with it. Now, you might not be the person who is authorised to accept the risk, but you can do the risk calculation and present that to your management structure of whatever flavour it is. You might be the person who accepts, and they say they can accept it. You should be very careful of accepting a risk which you are not authorised to accept. There is a technical term used called acting ultra vires. It means you are accepting risks which are not yours to accept. And if you do that, you end up being somehow responsible or liable. Make sure the right people understand who should be accepting the risk. Transferring a risk. Now, this is interesting. Not many people come across this one. This is basically making the risk somebody else's problem. Fantastic. You can buy some insurance, so all of a sudden, your insurance company is taking the risk because they're going to take the financial hit if it happens, and you're just going to pay them some money. Or you're going to transfer the risk by buying a service and making that service responsible for the risk. Usually transferring a risk will involve you paying some money for it. Or you can terminate the risk. You can just say, you know what, this is too risky, we are going to stop doing it. And you think about the risk triangle, threat, value, vulnerability. You might say, this information, no matter how we try to handle it, is too risky. It's too hard to handle. We just don't want to be doing this anymore. We're going to stop. We're just not going to do that anymore because it's actually, the risk profile is wrong for us. Make sure you document and agree your decisions, because especially if you've accepted a risk and then something blows up later, at least you can show the piece of paper. Oh, yeah, well, we looked at this and we accepted it. Not great. You don't want to have the slopey shoulders. You can take the responsibility for what you do. But you might also say, we advised you to treat the risk and you decided it was financially too expensive, and as a management team, you chose to accept it. as long as you document your work, you're fine. You hope.
You've missed ignore.
Ignore, yes. There isn't a T for ignore.
It must be higher up in life.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Technically, ignore is tolerate.
And fingers in the ears?
Also tolerate. But if that's your organisation doing that, they are by de facto tolerating it. All you need to do is document that that's what they're doing. You see, now, we've reached this point now, you've all started coming through this door. You're sort of ebbing out now over the next 5 minutes. Okay, so using the risk. You'll now have a simple example of risk language. This is the language your organisation may already speak. They will probably understand it better than the language of 0 days and malware and other things to do with what we do and what we enjoy doing for our day job. You have an ability to show them why something is important and when it's important, and also when it's not important. But you also have, going back to our it's all red, even the stuff that's red on CVS, on the OpenVMS Tenable scan, you can now look at that and say, it might be red from a Tenable point of view because they found this vulnerability, but this vulnerability is in a system that is of such low value that I'm going to risk assess that and say, it's a low risk. And my risk matrix, my appetite says, I don't need to do anything about that. I can accept that. So, are all the actions required to be done? Or, nice vulnerability, I don't care. So, just to recap, I've got a couple of minutes left. Is the echo chamber really an ivory silo? Is it of our own making? Have we actually, rather than us being the terribly misunderstood security people, are we actually creating the problem for ourselves by using language which is great for us, and we have to have that language to do our jobs? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that language. We also, maybe not the language that our organisations speak. Risk is threat plus vulnerability plus value. Quantified risk is impact multiplied by likelihood. Pro tip, by the way. If your impact is greater than your value, you've undervalued your asset. You can never have an impact greater than the value of your asset. Appetite and action align and agree with your organisation. So, we have a technical language for security, but there's also a technical language for risk. We need, as security professionals, I believe, to speak both if we are going to make headway with making cybersecurity, IT security, whatever you want to call it, relevant and have meaning in our organisations, and that be taken seriously within our organisations. So, on that basis, I'm going to say thank you very much. And are there any questions? Yeah, sir.
Would you agree that ISO 27001 is a good way of approaching a risk assessment?
I absolutely would. I think ISO 27001 is, no matter what other standard you want to layer on top of it, I think ISO 27001 is the best base standard because it's the most holistic and it's the least technical, but it also covers all the other domains like physical security, HR security, governance of security. So yeah, ISO 27001 is absolutely the best, because if you then have a requirement to apply NIST or PCI DSS or anything like that, you can always lay that on top of the ISO 27001 and map those controls down into the into the 114 ISO 27001 controls. If you've got a risk GRC risk tool, you can often do that within that tooling. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I like this because it introduces an element of commercial awareness into cybersecurity, which doesn't always exist. But where I start to struggle is on the idea of not caring. I'll give you an example. Imagine we've spoken to the boss face and we've got an established risk appetite. We're in a position where we know that according to our risk assessment, this is a risk that we can tolerate.
Yeah.
without regular reviews, a changing environment has the potential to elevate a risk that we've tolerated to something that we wouldn't any longer. So somebody bins off a firewall and forgets to replace it, or replaces it with a less functional model because cost saving. And so we end up with a whole bunch of stuff that we've tolerated that we now have to emergency break fix.
You're absolutely right. And I've just crammed what was a 5-day training course into 20 minutes. So, yes, once you've done your risk assessment, it's a living document. You've got to come back to it. You've got to set, this is tolerated or this is accepted until this date, and then we're going to review it and see if it's changed. So you're quite right. There is a time component to that, which I didn't mention. Quite. So, and also, I'll be honest, the I don't care. Actually, I do care, but it's a great title to hook you all into coming to listen to me talk about it. Yeah.
Lack of organisational appetite, both for risk and for knowing the assets, because it's just too difficult, too hard. And I don't really want to have the meeting. And I certainly don't want to sign the risk off, isn't it?
You don't? Well, okay.
In terms of the bosses.
The bosses, well, then if they're not responsible for it, who is? It's their business. They're the ones who ultimately will take the financial hit. They're paying us as security professionals to tell them what's wrong. If they're not prepared to listen to that, well, A, you can't do much about it. Maybe we just need to keep drip feeding this into them. The important thing about also, and this is why I suggest you use the same risk model that other parts of your organisation use, it means if you go to your management team, your executive board, your supervisory, whatever it is, and say, we've got a high risk, they're going to say, well, you say, and it's a high risk on our organisational risk model, they're going to say they should, if we're lucky, and they take us seriously, treat that as seriously as a high financial risk or a high health and safety risk, because we're using the same model, we're using the same scale of criteria. If they're not listening to that, I suggest you just have to keep saying it until they do. Or you'll wait till the first thing goes wrong and then they'll suddenly get a lot of attention. But at least if you've been talking about risk and you've been documenting your risk, see, I told you it was going to start drifting out.
Accelerate that.
My risk model for personal risk model for people leaving is it's almost green across the board. If you've actually documented it, I don't want to ever be in the position of saying to someone, "I told you so." But there probably is a nice way of saying, "We did warn you. You chose to ignore it. This is what's now happened. However, we still have all the work we did that we suggested you do to fix it. Let's get that out of the box and try it again." You're never going to fix your organisation. It's not your job to fix your organisation. It's your job to be a good cybersecurity professional. Any other questions?
You haven't mentioned the effort that it would take to fix a vulnerability. Is that something we shouldn't take into account?
It's absolutely something you should take into account. You need to balance that effort against the impact. But again, 20 minutes, 5 days. You're gonna say this, and that might be one of your reasons for tolerating risk. You might say that the impact of this risk is £10,000. The cost of fixing it is £500,000. We're just going to live with it. But unless that has maybe it's £10,000 financial, but maybe the reputational damage would be enormous. If you can get that message across to your budget holders, you're right. And sometimes you are the budget holders. Sometimes you are the people who make the risk decisions. So you had a question?
Yeah, just an observation really. As a person who works with a number of companies who are starting the path around security, they basically realise they need it. They're unregulated, but they feel they can improve it. One of the elements within some of the forms we've got there is value. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of companies will face is discovery of what they have and then assigning value to that.
Yes.
So
there's an easy way. There is an easy way of doing that. That scale of impact I gave you, take that scale of impact and say to them, identify your data sets and do it in big lumps if you can. Don't do it on individual files. And say to them, what would be the true value on this scale low, medium, high, 1 to 5, whatever it is, of the loss of confidentiality, of the loss of integrity, of the loss of availability. That gives you a model for assigning value, which you can then plug into that formula.
Not financial cost.
Your financials on there.
In terms of the data.
I'm not sure they always know what the financial impact is to the challenge.
No, they might not.
Educate them in ways that they don't thought.
They might not.
You can tell them you're going to lose all this stuff and not be able to do business.
But
that's easier than saying it's worth £1 million quid.
yeah, but maybe losing the ability to do business is the thing that they will value. How are we doing for time? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.